Millionaire Cowboy took her in when everyone else turned away. She gave him the family he never had. Clara had always thought the world was full of people who cared. She used to believe that no matter what happened, someone would be there for her. But that belief shattered the day her parents died. The accident was sudden, cruel, and unthinkable. One moment she had been laughing at a silly joke her father made on a rainy afternoon, and the next she was alone, standing in a sterile hospital corridor, holding a tiny bag of her things, while the doctors gave her news that felt impossible to accept. Her parents had been her world. Her father, a gentleman with a booming laugh, always made her feel safe. Her mother, warm and protective, had a way of making every day feel like home. Now, both were gone, and Clara felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her. The house they lived in suddenly felt too big and empty. Every corner reminded her of them: the kitchen where her mother hummed while cooking, the living room where her father read aloud every evening, the garden where they had planted flowers together in spring. Clara wandered from room to room, her hands brushing against objects that now held no comfort, only memories that cut deep into her heart. The next few days were a blur. Relatives she thought would care now seemed distant and impatient. "We have our own lives, Clara," one aunt said with a shrug when she asked to stay. Another relative avoided her eyes, muttering something about how hard it would be to take her in. Each rejection felt like another blow, a reminder that the world could be harsh and uncaring. Clara tried to hold back tears, tried to tell herself she could be strong, but at night, when she lay on the small cot in a relative's spare room, she would cry herself to sleep. She felt unwanted, like she no longer belonged anywhere. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to understand just how lonely the world could be. She went to school, but even there she felt different, like she was carrying a shadow with her that no one else could see. Her classmates whispered about her, asking questions she didn't want to answer. "Where do you live now?" they asked. "With your aunt? Your uncle?" She had to shake her head, swallow the lump in her throat, and say something neutral so they wouldn't notice how broken she felt. Her life became a quiet struggle. She learned to cook simple meals for herself, wash her clothes, and take care of the small space she had, but none of it felt like home. Home was her parents. Home was warmth, laughter, safety. Without them, everything seemed colder, darker, and lonelier. She wandered the streets at times, not knowing where to go, not knowing who would care. The small joys of childhood, playing in the park, reading a favorite book, sharing secrets with friends, felt far away, almost like they belonged to someone else. It was during one of those long walks that she first noticed the Carson Ranch. From a distance, the property looked enormous, stretching far and wide with rolling green fields, neat fences, and a barn that seemed like it had been painted only yesterday. Horses grazed in the pastures, their shiny coats catching the sun, and the smell of fresh hay filled the air. Clara had passed the ranch many times, always curious but never daring to go close. She knew it belonged to someone, and she didn't want to intrude. Luke Carson was a man of mystery to the town. Some people whispered that he was a millionaire, though he lived like a simple cowboy. He had built his fortune through hard work, long hours, and careful decisions, but he never flaunted his wealth. He was known for being kind to those in need, though he kept most people at a distance. To many, he seemed untouchable, a figure both admired and a little feared. He was tall, with broad shoulders and eyes that seemed to look right through a person, seeing both their strengths and their weaknesses. But more than anything, he carried a quiet loneliness, one that only a few could imagine. On that rainy afternoon, as Clara wandered near the fence of the Carson Ranch, she didn't know that her life was about to change. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking her clothes and making her shiver. Her small umbrella had broken in the wind, and she was lost, both in the storm and in her thoughts. She had no home to run to, no family to shelter her, and the streets offered nothing but puddles and empty faces. She walked closer to the ranch, thinking that maybe she could find shelter under the large barn roof or in one of the storage sheds. That's when she saw him, Luke Carson, riding across the field on a dark brown horse, the rain soaking his coat but never touching the calmness in his eyes. He noticed Clara immediately, the way someone notices a bird caught in a storm, fragile and uncertain. Without hesitation, he rode closer. "Are you all right?" he called, his voice steady and warm, cutting through the patter of the rain. Clara hesitated, unsure if she should answer. Strangers didn't usually offer help. People usually ignored her, or worse, sent her away. I'm just lost," she said finally, her voice trembling. The words felt small against the vastness of the storm, but they carried all the truth she could manage. Luke nodded, understanding more than she realized. Without asking questions, he gestured for her to follow him to the barn. "Come on, you can wait out the rain there." The barn was large and warm, filled with the scent of hay, leather, and the faint, comforting smell of horses. Clara's teeth chattered as she stepped inside, shaking off the cold and letting the warmth seep into her bones. Luke offered her a dry blanket and a hot cup of cocoa he had prepared for the animals' handlers. And for the first time in weeks, Clara felt something she hadn't in a long time: safety. They talked quietly while the rain continued outside. Luke didn't press her for her story. He didn't ask why she had nowhere to go or why her relatives had turned her away. He simply listened when she spoke and nodded when she stopped. Clara felt strange relief in that silence, a kind of comfort she had never experienced with strangers before. Luke Carson, the mysterious, wealthy cowboy, treated her like a person, not a problem, and that small gesture began to thaw the frozen edges of her heart. That night, when the storm finally let up, Luke offered Clara a place to stay temporarily. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. He simply said, "You can stay here until you figure things out." Those words, simple as they were, felt like a lifeline to Clara. She had been drifting for weeks, unsure of where she belonged, and for the first time she felt a sense of belonging, even if only temporary. As she lay in the small guest room of the Carson Ranch that night, listening to the faint creak of the barn and the soft breathing of horses, Clara let herself dream again. She imagined a life where she didn't have to be afraid, where she could laugh freely, where someone believed in her. She thought of Luke, tall and strong and quietly kind, and wondered how someone like him could be so alone, yet so willing to help a stranger in need. For the first time since her parents' death, Clara felt hope. It was fragile, like a tiny spark in the dark, but it was enough. And as the rain fell softly outside, washing the world clean, she realized that maybe, just maybe, her story was not over. Maybe there was a chance for happiness, for trust, for a family that she could choose rather than one she was forced into. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the ranch, Luke Carson thought the same thing. He had lived alone for years, building his empire but never letting anyone close. Yet, in that stormy moment, when he had opened his home and heart to a frightened young woman, he felt a shift. Perhaps this encounter was more than coincidence. Perhaps it was the beginning of something neither of them expected, a connection that would change both their lives forever. That night, in the warmth of the ranch, as Clara drifted into a deep sleep for the first time in what felt like forever, both she and Luke unknowingly took the first steps toward a new chapter. One of trust, one of care, and one that hinted at the possibility of family. not the kind given by birth, but the kind chosen with love. The next morning, Clara woke to the soft golden light spilling through the barn windows. The smell of fresh hay and horses filled the air, a comforting contrast to the cold, lonely street she had known. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. She was not at a relative's house, being told she was a burden. She was not alone on the hard pavement, shivering and wet from the rain. She was somewhere warm, safe, and filled with life. And, somehow, it was all because of Luke Carson. She tiptoed down the small hallway that led from the guest room to the main part of the ranch, careful not to wake him. But she didn't need to worry. Luke was already in the barn, talking softly to one of the horses, brushing its coat with steady, practiced movements. He didn't notice her at first, lost in the quiet routine that he had followed every morning for years. Clara watched him for a moment, studying the way he moved, strong, confident, and calm. And a strange feeling stirred in her chest. She realized that he seemed completely at peace here, surrounded by the animals and the land. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke turned, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Morning," he said, his voice warm. "Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded. "Yes, thank you." The words felt small compared to everything she wanted to say. "Thank you for taking me in. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for not turning me away like everyone else." She didn't know how to say all of that without sounding overwhelming, so she let her smile speak instead. Luke nodded, understanding in his own quiet way. "I made some breakfast," he said, leading her to a small kitchen attached to the barn. It wasn't fancy, just eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, but it smelled wonderful. Clara ate slowly, savoring the warmth and the normalcy of it all. Yet she had forgotten what it felt like to have a simple meal, prepared with care without worry. After breakfast, Luke suggested she help him with chores around the ranch. Clara hesitated at first. She had never been around horses or large fields before. The idea of working on a ranch seemed intimidating, but Luke's calm encouragement made her feel safe enough to try. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "Just give it a try. I'll show you everything." Her first task was feeding the horses. Clara watched as Luke measured the oats, mixed them with water, and carefully filled each feeding trough. He showed her how to approach the horses without startling them, how to hold the bucket, and how to talk to them gently. At first, Clara felt awkward. The horses were much larger than she expected, and she was afraid of making a mistake. But Luke stayed beside her, guiding her patiently, never raising his voice, never showing frustration. By the end of the morning, Clara felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in months. The horses had eaten, the barn was clean, and she had learned something new. Luke noticed the small spark of pride in her eyes and smiled, though he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Clara felt it in the quiet, in the way he simply stood beside her, trusting her to do her best. Over the next few days, Clara began to settle into life on the ranch. She learned to sweep the barn, groom the animals, and even ride a horse under Luke's careful supervision. Each task, no matter how small, gave her a sense of purpose. She realized that she could be useful, that she could contribute, that she could belong somewhere. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. Luke, too, began to open up in small ways. He didn't speak much about his feelings, but he shared stories of his childhood on the ranch, of growing up without siblings, of learning to work hard to build his life. Clara listened quietly, fascinated. She could see the loneliness in his past, the gaps in his life where family should have been. She felt a connection to him, a sense of understanding that neither of them had expected. One afternoon, as they worked together to mend a fence damaged in the storm, Luke paused and looked at Clara. "You know," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "not many people would have come here. Not many would have stayed if I didn't ask." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I had nowhere else to go." "But I'm glad I did." Luke nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't just about having a place to stay. It was about trust, about kindness, about the rare moments when someone sees you and doesn't turn away. For both of them, it was a small miracle, a moment that neither expected, but both needed. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's presence on the ranch became a routine that felt natural. She had her chores, she had her space, and she had someone who cared for her in a way that didn't feel forced or conditional. Luke noticed changes in her too. The way she smiled more, the way she laughed at small things, the way her shoulders relaxed when she worked. She was no longer the frightened, lonely girl who had arrived on a rainy night. She was becoming someone strong, confident, and capable. Yet, despite the growing bond between them, Clara remained cautious. She had been hurt too many times, turned away by the people who were supposed to care. She was afraid of becoming too attached, afraid that if she let herself trust too much, she would only face rejection again. She kept her heart guarded, testing Luke's patience with small questions, small hesitations. But Luke, with the patience of someone who had learned from a life of solitude, never pushed. He simply offered steady support, showing her through actions rather than words that she could rely on him. One evening, as the sun set over the rolling fields, Clara and Luke sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The horses grazed peacefully in the distance, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the countryside. Clara took a deep breath, letting the peace of the moment wash over her. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost to herself. Luke glanced at her, curious. "For what?" "For everything," she replied. "For letting me stay, for trusting me, for not turning me away like everyone else did." Luke looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "It was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And I'm glad you're here." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that neither had expected. For Clara, it was a confirmation that she had found a place where she could belong. For Luke, it was a reminder that opening his heart, even just a little, could bring unexpected joy. As the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Clara began to understand the rhythms of ranch life, learning to anticipate the needs of the animals, the changes in the weather, and the small joys that came from hard work. Luke, in turn, began to appreciate her presence in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her laughter brought light to the long, quiet days. Her questions and curiosity reminded him of the simple joys of life he had often overlooked. Together, they created a rhythm, a life that felt balanced and meaningful. Yet, even in the safety and warmth of the ranch, both Clara and Luke knew that challenges awaited. The world beyond the fence was still unpredictable, still full of people who might not understand their bond, still full of difficulties that could test their trust. But for now, in the quiet moments of shared work, shared meals, and shared stories, they found something rare, a sense of belonging, a sense of family, a sense that, for the first time in a long time, everything might be okay. One evening, as Clara prepared dinner and Luke tended to the horses, she paused and looked around the ranch. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a sky full of stars. She felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in years, a feeling of safety, of hope, of something that could grow into love. And she realized that this place, this man, and this life were offering her something she had longed for more than anything, a chance to belong, to trust, and to start over. Luke, watching her from the barn door, felt a similar realization. For years he had worked alone, built his empire alone, and faced life alone. Yet now, with Clara here, he sensed a future that was richer than any fortune, warmer than any fire, and more fulfilling than any achievement. She was not just a guest on his ranch. She was becoming part of his life, part of his world, part of the family he had never had. And in that moment, as the night settled over the ranch and the world grew quiet, both Clara and Luke understood something profound. Sometimes, family is not given by birth, but found in the hearts of those who care enough to stay, to help, and to love. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to feel more comfortable on the ranch than she had in months, maybe even years. Every morning she would wake to the soft glow of the sun over the fields, the distant sound of horses neighing, and the smell of fresh hay. She had her chores: feeding the animals, cleaning the barn, tending to the small vegetable garden, and helping Luke repair fences or prepare for the cattle drives. At first these tasks had seemed overwhelming, but now they were a part of her rhythm. She felt needed, useful, and capable in a way she had never known. Luke, too, noticed the changes in her. The timid girl who had arrived, wet and shivering, had grown stronger, more confident, and even cheerful. She laughed at small jokes, spoke freely when she had thoughts to share, and moved through the ranch with a grace that seemed natural. Luke could see that her heart was slowly opening, and he found himself admiring her resilience. She had faced so much, yet she still managed to find courage in the little things. One morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, Clara and Luke were walking through the fields together. Clara carried a small basket of eggs, and Luke rode beside her on his horse. The breeze was cool, and the air smelled of grass and earth. It was peaceful, almost perfect, and Clara felt a sense of calm she hadn't known since her parents' death. "Do you ever get tired of this life?" she asked, glancing at him. "Of the work, the responsibility?" Luke thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "It can be hard, especially when you have no one to share it with. But I like it. It's honest, it's real, and it's mine." Clara nodded, thinking about her own past. She had never really had a home, not truly. She had drifted from one place to another, always searching for someone who would care enough to stay. "I think I understand," she said softly. "Hard work can be comforting in a way. It gives life meaning." Luke glanced at her, a small smile forming. "You've learned fast," he said, "and you care about things more than most people your age." Clara felt a warmth rise in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was pride or something else, but she liked the feeling. She liked that Luke noticed her. For so long she had felt invisible, but here, on the ranch, with him, she felt seen. As the days went by, their bond grew deeper. They faced small challenges together: repairing a broken fence after a storm, calming a frightened horse, or figuring out how to keep the garden safe from deer. Each challenge was a chance to learn more about each other. Luke admired Clara's patience and determination, while Clara admired his wisdom, strength, and quiet kindness. She began to understand that Luke's wealth was not just in money, but in character and heart. One afternoon, while mending fences near the edge of the property, Luke paused and looked at Clara. "You know," he said, "I never had a family growing up. I had my parents, but they passed away when I was young. No siblings, no cousins, nothing. I've always been alone in many ways." Clara stopped, her hands resting on the fence. She looked at him with sympathy. I understand," she said quietly. "I lost my parents, too. And then, everyone else seemed to turn away. I know what it feels like to be alone." Luke's eyes softened. He had known loneliness all his life, but hearing someone else speak it aloud, especially someone so young, made it feel heavier and yet lighter at the same time. It's not easy, he admitted. Even when you have money, even when you have success, it doesn't replace family. It doesn't replace someone caring for you just because they love you, not because they have to. Clara nodded slowly, understanding more than she could express. She had spent so long seeking acceptance and love, and now, in Luke's presence, she realized that it was possible to find both in unexpected places. She realized that family could be more than blood. It could be the people who choose to stay, to care, and to trust you. The days continued with quiet lessons and small moments of joy. Clara learned how to ride confidently, how to groom horses so they relaxed under her touch, and even how to handle the cattle during drives. Luke watched her with pride, never boasting or drawing attention, but feeling a quiet happiness that he hadn't known he could feel. He realized that he enjoyed her presence more than he could have imagined. Her laughter was like music, her curiosity a spark that brightened the long days. One evening, as they sat by the barn after finishing chores, Luke handed Clara a small notebook. "I thought you might like this," he said. "You can write about anything you want. Thoughts, stories, dreams." Clara took it carefully, her fingers brushing his for a moment. She felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and something warmer she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she whispered. I've never really written for anyone before." Luke nodded, smiling gently. "You can start now." That night, Clara sat in her small room, opening the notebook. She wrote about the stormy night she had arrived, the warmth of the barn, and the kindness Luke had shown her. She wrote about her parents, about the loneliness she had felt, and about the first time she had felt safe in weeks. As she wrote, she realized that her heart was slowly healing. She was finding a place where she belonged, a place where she could trust, and a person who made her feel valued. Weeks passed, and Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She laughed more freely, spoke with more confidence, and carried herself with a quiet strength. She no longer felt like a burden. Instead, she felt like she had purpose and place. And Luke noticed it too. He saw her growing in ways that made him proud, not just because of her abilities, but because of her courage and heart. One day, while walking along the creek that ran through the ranch, Clara stopped and looked at Luke. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" she asked. "That maybe you had a family, people to share life with?" Luke thought for a moment. "I did," he admitted. "But now, I'm realizing that sometimes life gives you unexpected gifts. People you never expected to meet can change everything. And maybe, just maybe, a family isn't always born. Sometimes it's built." Clara smiled softly, understanding exactly what he meant. She had never felt so connected to anyone before, and yet, in these simple, quiet moments on the ranch, she felt it. An unspoken bond, a shared understanding, and a sense of trust that was rare and precious. Their connection deepened in small, everyday ways. Luke would notice when Clara was cold and offer his jacket. Clara would make a hot drink for Luke after a long morning of chores. They shared stories from their pasts, hopes for the future, and dreams they had never dared speak aloud. Each moment brought them closer, though neither spoke of it directly. There was a comfort in the silence, in knowing that someone was always there, quietly supporting and understanding. But even as their bond grew, the world outside the ranch remained unpredictable. Clara knew that this peace could not last forever. She had been rejected before, and she feared it could happen again. Luke knew that life could bring challenges, business matters, neighbors with misunderstandings, or strangers who might not understand the closeness between them. Yet, for now, they chose to focus on the present, on the quiet joy of connection, on the simple beauty of life on the ranch. One afternoon, Clara was helping Luke plant new crops in the garden when she paused, looking around at the vast open fields. "I never thought I'd be happy like this," she said quietly. "I didn't think anyone could care about me. Not really." Luke wiped sweat from his brow and looked at her, a soft smile on his face. "Sometimes the people who care the most are the ones you least expect. And sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters." Clara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that went beyond gratitude. She realized that she was beginning to trust, to believe, and to hope again. She was beginning to understand that family could be found in the most unexpected ways, and that perhaps Luke Carson, with his quiet strength and kind heart, was becoming a part of that family she had always dreamed of. As the sun set over the ranch that evening, casting golden light across the fields, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, learning, and growing. And Luke, watching her with quiet admiration, felt the same. For the first time in years, both of them sensed that life could be more than loneliness, more than loss, more than survival. It could be filled with trust, kindness, and the beginnings of a family built on love, care, and shared life. And so, with each passing day, they continued to work, to learn, and to grow together. Their bond, though unspoken, was undeniable. Each small act, each shared moment, and each quiet evening strengthened the connection between them. Clara had found someone who believed in her, someone who saw her worth. And Luke had found someone who reminded him that life, even after loss, could still bring unexpected joy. In the quiet of the ranch, under the open sky, surrounded by animals and nature, both Clara and Luke began to understand something profound. Life could be difficult, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it could also be beautiful, comforting, and full of love. And when two people chose to care for each other, to trust each other, and to stay, even in small ways, they could create something rare and wonderful. A family not born of blood, but of heart. Life on the Carson Ranch had settled into a comforting rhythm. Clara had grown stronger, more confident, and happier than she had been in years. Luke had begun to see her not just as a guest, but as someone essential to the ranch, and in a quiet, unspoken way, to his life. Days were filled with chores, laughter, shared meals, and small conversations that slowly built trust and understanding. But even in the calmest places, life has a way of testing the bonds we hold most dear. It started one morning with a letter. Clara had been helping Luke sort through the mail when he handed her a plain envelope. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. Luke frowned slightly as he opened it. The letter was from a lawyer, informing him that a distant relative of his late parents had arrived in town and intended to challenge some of his land ownership. It was a legal matter, technical and complicated, but the implication was clear. Someone wanted to interfere with Luke's ranch. Clara watched him carefully. "Does that mean trouble for the ranch?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Luke ran a hand over his face, a rare show of frustration. "Maybe," he said slowly. "I'll handle it. I've faced challenges before, but it's complicated. It could take time to sort out." Clara nodded, but inside, a small knot of fear tightened. She had come to love the ranch, the animals, and most of all, the quiet life she shared with Luke. The thought of losing it all, or seeing Luke stressed and burdened, felt unbearable. Yet she knew there was nothing she could do but trust him, as he had trusted her when she first arrived. Over the next few days, tension settled over the ranch like a heavy cloud. Luke spent long hours speaking with lawyers and reviewing documents. Clara tried to help where she could, taking care of chores and keeping the animals calm, But she noticed the stress etched into Luke's normally calm face. He was tired, quiet, and distracted. Clara felt powerless, wishing she could do more. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the creek, Clara accidentally dropped a hammer. Luke, who had been reviewing a map of the property boundaries, didn't notice immediately. When he looked up and saw her flinch, he stopped and walked over. "Clara," he said gently, "don't worry so much about things you can't control." I don't want to see you upset," she replied, lowering her eyes. "I don't know what I can do to help." Luke placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're helping more than you know," he said. "Just being here, just caring. It matters. But some things I have to handle on my own." Despite Luke's reassurance, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She had already faced so much rejection in her life, and now she feared losing the one place and the one person she had finally come to trust. She spent nights lying awake in the guest room, listening to the wind rustle the barn roof, thinking about what could happen. As the legal situation progressed, a distant relative arrived in town. A stern, cold man named Mr. Harlow, who claimed that part of the ranch had been promised to him. He was formal and unyielding, refusing to speak with Luke personally at first, sending letters and making demands instead. His arrival cast a shadow over the ranch. The animals seemed restless, and even the normally peaceful fields felt tense. Clara felt the weight of the uncertainty pressing down on her chest. One evening, after a long day of meetings with lawyers and city officials, Luke returned to the ranch looking exhausted. Clara had prepared a simple meal, hoping it would give him comfort. She set the plates on the wooden table in the barn kitchen. "You should eat," she said softly. "You've been at this all day," Luke sighed, sitting down and taking a deep breath. "I will," he said, "but it's not easy. I've worked so hard for this place, and now someone wants to take even a part of it away. It feels unfair." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "I know it feels unfair," she said gently, "but you're not alone. I'm here, and I'll help however I can." Luke looked at her, a mix of gratitude and sadness in his eyes. "You've already helped more than you realize," he said. "Your presence here, it reminds me why this place matters. Not just the land, but the life we've built together." The next week brought more tension. Mr. Harlow continued to push his claims, and Luke had to travel into town repeatedly to handle legal matters. Clara tried to manage the ranch in his absence, but she struggled with the responsibility. She wasn't used to handling everything on her own, and the fear of making a mistake gnawed at her. One morning she accidentally allowed one of the horses to wander beyond the fence. She chased it across the field, heart racing, feeling panic rise in her chest. When Luke returned later that day, he found Clara sitting on the porch steps, exhausted and defeated. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, tears brimming. "I almost lost him. I don't know what I'm doing." Luke knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers. "Clara," he said softly, "you didn't fail. You're learning. And I trust you. I trust that you care about this place and everyone in it. That's more important than perfection." Clara looked up, her eyes shining. "Do you really mean that?" Luke nodded. "I mean it. You've grown so much, and you've already proven yourself. This ranch, this life, it's bigger than any of us alone. That's why we work together." Even with Luke's reassurance, the shadow of the legal battle loomed over them. Harlow's persistence created tension not just for Luke, but for Clara as well. She worried constantly, wondering if the ranch would survive, if Luke would be forced to leave, or if their quiet life would be disrupted forever. She realized with a sinking feeling how deeply she had come to depend on the stability of the ranch, and how much she cared for Luke. One night, as a storm rolled in, Clara and Luke stood on the porch together, watching the rain pour down in sheets. The wind howled, and the animals in the barn stirred nervously. Clara felt a familiar fear, the one she had carried since losing her parents. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of losing the people she loved. "I don't want to lose this place," she whispered. "You won't," Luke replied, though even he didn't sound completely certain. "We'll fight for it, together." But life, as they both knew, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. The very next morning, a new complication arose. A group of surveyors arrived, sent by the courts to examine the land and confirm its boundaries. Clara watched nervously as they measured and marked, feeling helpless. Luke did his best to stay calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. As the days passed, Clara began to realize that the ranch and the bond they had built was vulnerable to forces beyond their control. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect the place she had grown to love and the man who had become a quiet pillar in her life. Yet she also felt fear and uncertainty, emotions she hadn't faced in a long time. She had trusted before and been disappointed, and now she worried whether trusting again would bring pain. One evening, after a particularly long day, Luke sat in the barn with Clara. He looked tired, but there was a determined fire in his eyes. "No matter what happens, we'll get through this," he said firmly. "The ranch is ours, and we'll protect it. And I won't let anything happen to you either." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief and admiration. She realized that her trust in Luke and his trust in her had become a lifeline for both of them. Even as challenges arose, they were no longer alone. They faced life together, learning that the true strength of family, chosen or born, was in standing by each other through fear, uncertainty, and hardship. Despite the looming challenges, Clara began to feel a quiet hope. The storm outside the barn mirrored the storm in their lives, but she knew they had weathered storms before. And with Luke by her side, she felt capable of facing whatever came next. She realized that life was not about avoiding difficulties. It was about meeting them with courage, support, and trust. As the sun set after a long week of uncertainty, Clara and Luke walked through the fields, the rain-soaked earth soft beneath their boots. The wind had calmed, and the sky was painted in shades of gold and pink. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a sense of determination rise within her. She knew that challenges would continue, but she also knew that she had found something rare, a place to belong, a life worth fighting for, and a person she could trust. And in that moment, standing in the open fields with Luke, she realized that family was not just about blood or promises. It was about the people who choose to stand by you, who care for you, even when the world seems determined to test your strength. The weeks of uncertainty and tension had finally begun to settle. The legal challenge from Mr. Harlow had been complicated and stressful, but Luke had faced it with patience, determination, and careful planning. He had relied on his knowledge of the land, the advice of lawyers, and, perhaps most importantly, the quiet support of Clara. Through every meeting, every disagreement, and every long day, she had been by his side, offering encouragement, helping with the ranch, and reminding him of what truly mattered. The day the court finally ruled in Luke's favor was bright and clear. The sky was a deep blue, the sun warming the rolling fields, and the wind carried the sweet scent of grass and flowers. Clara was outside, tending to the garden, when Luke approached her with a broad smile. His eyes, usually calm and guarded, shone with relief and happiness. "It's over," he said simply. Clara looked up, feeling her heart lift. "You won?" Luke nodded, laughing softly. We won. The ranch is ours, and it always will be. You helped more than you know. I couldn't have done it without you." Clara felt a rush of emotion. Relief, pride, and joy all mixed together, and she smiled, almost laughing through tears. I'm so glad," she said. "I've never seen you this happy." Luke reached out, taking her hand gently. "I'm happy because of you too," he said. "You've been here through everything, and I realize something important. I don't want to face life alone anymore." Clara's chest tightened. She had felt this bond growing for weeks, months even, but hearing Luke say it aloud made it real. She had spent so much of her life fearing rejection, fearing abandonment, fearing that even kindness was temporary. But now, she knew that she had found someone she could trust completely, someone who would choose her every day. The next few days brought a sense of normalcy that Clara had never thought she would experience. With the legal battle behind them, Luke and Clara could focus on the ranch, on the animals, and on each other. There was laughter again, playful teasing, and quiet evenings spent under the wide open sky. The horses grazed peacefully in the pastures, the cattle moved calmly across the fields, and the barn echoed with the familiar sounds of life and work. One morning, as Clara helped Luke repair a section of fence near the creek, she paused and looked at him. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I'd feel like this again. Like I really belong somewhere." Luke glanced at her, a small warm smile tugging at his lips. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I've lived a long time without a family, without someone to share life with. But now, I realize that family isn't always about blood. It's about love, care, and choosing to be there for each other." Clara nodded, feeling tears well up. "I feel the same," she whispered. "You gave me a home, a sense of safety, and a family. You believed in me when no one else did." Luke reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing," he said. "You gave me family, Clara. You gave me a reason to hope again." The two of them spent the day finishing repairs on the fence, working side by side in perfect harmony. Clara realized how much she had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence and strength. She could ride the horses, care for the animals, manage the garden, and handle the ranch chores with competence. But more importantly, she had grown emotionally. She had learned to trust again, to rely on someone without fear, and to open her heart. That evening, Luke prepared a small surprise for Clara. He had gathered fresh flowers from the garden, baked bread with honey, and set a simple table outside under the stars. When Clara stepped into the clearing, her eyes widened in delight. "I thought maybe we could celebrate," Luke said softly. "Celebrate the ranch, the end of the court battle, and us." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had never experienced something so thoughtful, so personal. She realized then that Luke had been thinking about her, considering her feelings, and wanting to make her happy. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about how far their bond had come. As they sat together, eating and talking under the starlit sky, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that this was what she had been searching for all her life. Not wealth, not recognition, not even just safety, but connection. A person who cared for her, a place where she was valued, and a life filled with meaning and purpose. Over the following weeks, the ranch flourished. Luke and Clara worked together on planting new crops, repairing old buildings, and expanding the gardens. The animals thrived under their care, and the land seemed more vibrant than ever. But beyond the work, something more important was happening: the quiet building of a family. Clara found joy in small routines: preparing meals, tending to the garden, and caring for the horses. Luke found joy in her laughter, her curiosity, and her gentle presence. They shared stories from their pasts, dreams for the future, and hopes that had once seemed impossible. Each day brought them closer, not just as companions, but as family. One afternoon, while walking along the creek, Clara noticed the sunlight reflecting on the water, creating a warm, golden glow. She felt a sense of belonging that she had never known. "I can't believe how different life feels now," she said. "I used to think I'd always be alone, but now I feel like I have everything I need." Luke smiled, taking her hand. "Everything you need, and everything I need," he said softly. "You've made this place more than a ranch. You've made it home. You've made me feel like I finally belong." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that in trusting Luke, in staying with him, she had found not just safety but love, hope, and family. And Luke in turn realized that caring for Clara, protecting her, and sharing his life with her had filled a void he hadn't even known existed. The final test of their bond came when a neighboring ranch offered Luke a business opportunity that would require him to be away for months. Clara felt a twinge of fear. The thought of losing the daily connection they had built was unsettling. But Luke held her hands firmly and looked into her eyes. "Clara, this opportunity is important," he said, "but nothing will change between us. We've built something strong. We can face distance if we have to. We have each other." Clara nodded, understanding the depth of his words. She realized that family wasn't just about proximity or convenience, it was about commitment, care, and trust. And with Luke, she knew they could face any challenge together. When the day of his departure arrived, Clara helped him prepare for the journey, packing supplies, checking the horses, and ensuring the ranch would continue to run smoothly in his absence. They shared a quiet moment on the porch before he left. "Promise me something," Luke said softly. "What?" Clara asked. "Promise me that you'll take care of yourself, and promise me that you'll remember that this is home," he said.
"I promise,"
Clara replied, feeling tears in her eyes. "And promise me you'll come back soon?" Luke smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I promise," he said. The weeks passed, and Clara worked diligently on the ranch, carrying out tasks with confidence and care. She missed Luke deeply, but she knew that their bond was unbreakable. Letters and small notes kept them connected, and the thought of their eventual reunion gave her strength. Finally, the day came when Luke returned. Clara ran to meet him at the edge of the driveway, her heart racing. Luke dismounted his horse, smiling warmly. "I'm back," he said, his voice filled with relief and joy. Clara threw her arms around him, feeling a wave of happiness and belonging wash over her. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too," Luke replied, holding her close. "But being apart made me realize something even more important. I don't want to be without you, ever. You are family, Clara. You are home." In that moment, standing together in the golden light of the afternoon, Clara and Luke understood that they had found what they had both been searching for all along: love, trust, and a family built on care, commitment, and shared life. The ranch, the animals, and the land were important, but the true treasure was the bond they shared and the home they had created together. As they walked hand in hand through the fields, the wind blowing gently through the trees, Clara felt a peace she had never known. She had been lost, alone, and uncertain of her place in the world, but now she had everything she had ever hoped for: safety, love, and a family she had chosen with her heart. And Luke, watching her smile, knew that his life had changed in the most profound way. He had given Clara a home, and in return, she had given him the family he had always longed for. Together they faced the future with hope, courage, and a deep understanding that family was not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and the people who choose to stay through every storm and challenge. Under the open sky, with the ranch stretching out around them and the animals grazing peacefully, Clara and Luke stood together, ready to face life as a family, stronger, happier, and united. And in that quiet, golden moment, they knew that this was just the beginning of a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities.